I'm back with you again, and we're going to learn about pressure canning right now. Now, I've got a couple of my pressure canners out, and these are two totally different kinds of pressure canners, but I want to show you how they're put together and all that kind of stuff so you can see, they're not as scary as what some of y'all might think they are. So I'm going to turn this around and show you. I've got an old one here that I don't use very often anymore. You can see it's a very simple pressure canner. I think it's called a Miramatic. Okay, and the first thing that of course you see that it's got the vent pipe there, and I've got in my drawer, I've got the weight that goes on it. Now the weight for this is just exactly like the one that's on my All-American, and it's got, the 5, 10, and 15 pound options on it, and those are something we'll cover just a little bit later, but that fits on here to help it build up to the pressure that you're going to want it to flip, to get up to. Now, before I show you anything further, I want to show you here on the top of this canner, if you notice right here, that is a pop-out valve. Now, if this canner, say for instance, if this got blocked some way, if it got blocked up and the pressure could not escape, in order to keep the pressure canner from blowing up, that pop-out valve, once a certain amount of pressure gets on that thing's going to pop out, just like what it says. And I have another pressure canner that, instead of having it just like this, it has the gauge on it, like the gauge here on my All-American, and it is set in the top of the canner with a rubber gasket. Now, my rubber gasket got a little dried out and I didn't realize it. Should have inspected it before I used it, but I walked away from the canner for a minute, and as I was stepping back into the room, it popped and the gauge hit the ceiling and all of the pressure escaped out of my canner. But when I opened it, there was not a single jar broken. It had just released the pressure. And that's what they're designed to do. It'll scare you a little bit when it happens. It scared me. I turned and started to run at first, and then I realized what had happened. And that's the first time I had ever had that happen. And I've been canning for, helping and doing it on my own for about 50 years. And I had never had that happen before. And that's only been about 3 or 4 years ago since that happened. So, but if you maintain your canners, then, they will not give you any problems. Now, I'm going to show you, I think I can do this with one hand. This canner, let me lay that lid down there. This has the rubber gasket that fits around the lid. That's what helps hold this seal. Now you can see this one hasn't been used for a while, and you can see it's a little bit loose around there, but if you soak it in some hot water, it will fit just fine. You soak it about 15 or 20 minutes in some hot water. This one also has the plate in the bottom of it, and you can see that one's been used a long time. I've had this one probably, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 years. I don't know really how long I have had it. But this one has a little latch that when it builds up to the pressure, that latch will go down in the handle, and it will not release until the pressure is gone from this canner. Now, the other canner that I have, and it's the one that I really like, is the All-American. And you can see I've got this one set up. Notice inside of this one, there's water down in it. You may not be able to see that. It's beginning to get hot, but you can see there I've got water. It's got about 3 quarts of water in the bottom of it. It needs to come up about 2 inches on the jars. You'll notice that I've got a wide mouth quart, a regular mouth quart, another regular mouth quart. I've got a 1.5 pints and 2 pints in the canner. Now, if you mix sizes in a canner, you have to process it or cook it the length of time it takes to can the largest jar. So I would have to process whatever I'm canning for the largest jar, which would be the quarts in this case. Now, this canner obviously is not large enough to handle the half gallons. I do have one that's tall enough to handle half gallons, but I don't use it very often for that. More often than not, my half gallons are water bath canned because I use them for pickles and tomato juice. So this one, I have it, the burner is on, as you can see, and I have it starting to get hot. Now, Milburn, would you come and hold my camera for me a minute? And I'm going to lock this down, and I want to show you how I'm going to, you see there on the side of this canner, it's got a couple of those on it that latch. See, it latches underneath there. And then on the top of it, I noticed I told you on the other one there was a pop-out valve. This one has a rubber pop-out valve. So that has to be changed every couple of years. They're not expensive. You know, you you can order them on Amazon or wherever. And but that's one of your safeties. Now, as the pressure builds, when you've got this is a little jiggler is what I call it, because it starts to rock whenever the pressure builds up. And when that builds up, if this thing is going crazy like that, you've got too much pressure. It needs to just a little bit of rocking on there is enough to hold the pressure. So if it starts doing this, you need to decrease your heat so that it won't get too high. Now, on the gauge, you can see there, well, maybe you can see there, there is the numbers 5, 10, 15, and then as you get on over there, you can see it says caution. If it ever gets into that caution area, you need to turn the heat completely off. If you can do it, then move the canner off of the heat. But if it's way up into that caution area, just turn the heat off and leave the room. Because it is to the point, if it's in that caution area, where that pop-out valve could blow out, and when it does, there could be water come out of the pop-out valve, and obviously steam's going to come out, and you could get burnt. So you want to pay attention, stay with your canner, and most areas of the country are going to use 10 pounds of pressure. So when that gauge gets up here to 10 to 12 pounds, and the little jiggler starts jiggling on the other one over there, it would just be a jiggler. But then it's going to be, you know, you got to get your heat to the point that it will stay at that same weight. Okay, now I'm going to let my husband hold this so I can lock this down. He's going to be my helper today since my granddaughter's not here. The camera's right there, so don't put your finger up there. Okay, so what you do is alternate back and forth across the canner to lock it down like that. And that way your canner's going to be on straight. You noticed on this one there was no rubber gasket under this lid. It locks metal to metal. And oh, and I should have shown you all that I have just take a little bit of cooking oil and rub around the lid so that it won't get to the point that, thank you, so that it won't get to the point that it sticks together, and they will do that sometimes. I'm going to loosen that back up a little because it looks like I've got this side up a little. But anyway, what I need to do now is wait. You're supposed to wait until you see steam coming out of the vent pipe. And it needs to vent for 10 minutes. So I'm going to set this on 10 pounds. Make sure I'm seeing this right, and I don't have my glasses on, but make sure I'm seeing that on 10 pounds. I believe that's right. I don't want it on 15 because it'll take longer to build up to steam. Okay, so I'm actually going to wait right here with you, and we're going to watch this thing build the steam and watch the canner start to steam. Now, I'm seeing back here on my pop-out valve, I'm seeing just a little bit of water coming around that. So once I'm done with this, I'm going to change out my pop-out valve because I just saw some water coming around it. Wouldn't it be something if that thing popped out with us videoing? So, but I'm not afraid of it. I want you to understand there's nothing to be afraid of. If that pops out, my curtains are probably going to get wet and the side of the cabinet's going to get wet, but that's going to be the worst of it. So, anyway, so I see that that looks like the gauge is beginning. See if I can show you there. It's just barely above 0 already. So it's beginning to build some pressure. Now, I mentioned whenever I was doing the water bath, I don't think I mentioned that water bath canning is only for high acid foods. Fruits and vegetables that you're going to be adding vinegar or lemon juice, or fruits and vegetables that are already high acid foods. So that's just something you want to keep in mind, that, you know, if you're canning apples or oranges or jellies, tomatoes. Now, the USDA says you need to add lemon juice to tomatoes, or citric acid, or you know, vinegar, different, some kind of a acid that they say you should add to it. You notice our gauge is up nearing the 5 mark now. But that's something that you will need to find a hardware store or a county extension office. And once every year, you need to take your canners to those people and let them check and make sure the gauges are still correct. You know, the gauges can, you know, if you bump them or whatever, they can get out of sync with the canner, and so you might need to replace a gauge or replace a pop-out valve, and the metal pop-out valves can be replaced as well. I try to keep extra pieces, extra parts for my canner on hand all the time because, you know, I can't be without my canner for weeks on end. But that's up to a little bit over a 7 now, so it's not going to be too long till we're going to see that weight start to bounce. And you can see I've got the burner is set on high. Now, as you use a pressure canner, you will just get used to what temperature that your canner will need to be on for it to stay at the weight that it needs to be. If you're pressure canning something and it says to pressure can it at 10 pounds of pressure or 12 pounds of pressure for 5 minutes, if it drops below the required pressure, then you're going to need to start your time all over again. So that's something to keep in mind. You know, don't drop the temperature, the thermostat on your burner too rapidly, because that'll cause it to drop below the required pressure, and then you're going to have to start all over. But you know, just one little mark at a time, because it's not going to. You can see how slow it's building pressure. It's up to about 8 right now, but you can see how fast it's building pressure, or how slow it is. And so to get it on up to 20 pounds of pressure where the caution mark is going to take another 10 minutes. So gradually decrease the temperature on your burner and until you see the gauge start to go back down. And then, as it gets to, if it gets there and it just stops, you'll know you're at the right place. Now, what's going to happen if you turn it up and down too much, you're going to get siphoning from your jars. The liquid, say if you've got green beans and the liquid's up over your green beans and they start to siphon, it's going to pull the water out of your jars, and your green beans are going to be, they're going to be exposed. And, it's not going to ruin them, but they will start to change color in the jars, and of course they'll lose some of their nutritional value and some stuff like that. And of course, when they change colors, they're not too pleasing to the eye to eat them either. So, but that's getting, you can see there, it's getting up there real close to that 10. Like I said, on mine, it's probably going to go up to close to 12. And this is it's going to be depending on your elevation. And that's something important that you're going to want to know. And I recommend this to everybody I teach canning. Get you a 3-ring binder or a spiral bound notebook, and on the very first page, get on the internet, put in your city, and ask what is the elevation of your city, and write it down in the front of your book, and then you will always know what pressure you need to pressure can at. Now you can see my gauge is right there on the 10 mark. It's actually just a tiny bit above 10 already, and I can hear a little bit of steam coming up into the weight. Now it's not enough to make it start to move yet, but I can hear it. So I will wait until it starts, getting to the pressure, and wait until that weight starts to bounce quite a bit before I start adjusting the temperature. I want you to see there, that weight is just barely over the 10 mark. So we're going to start seeing some action here just in a minute. And as you can see, it's a long ways. It's been a good 8 or 10 minutes getting it up that far, and it's a long ways from the caution area. So, that's why I keep saying, it could be scary, but as long as you stay with it and watch your pressure, don't walk away. Don't go get on the phone or get interested in a TV program, or have company over and forget about your canner. You can see there it's above the 10. It's actually on 11 now. So one more mark, and it should be up to where it needs to be. I don't know if you can see this or not. Let me see if I can get here where you can see there's a little water dropping down under there. Yeah, there you can see it. The steam is coming up into the weight and causing some condensation. That's why you see a little black around that vent pipe. And but that's okay. It's just condensation coming up there. Now, back here on see, you don't see anything coming around that pop-out valve. But you can see the condensation there. And now the weight of the gauge is right on the 12. It's almost to it. Okay, can you hear the steam coming out of there? And it's beginning to move that weight just a tiny little bit. But I'm just trying to make sure y'all can see everything that's happening. You can see there it's right on the 12 now. So that weight's going to start rocking here just any minute. See, it's starting to to move around now. And I'm going to go down here on this, and I'm going to decrease it just 1 mark. And then I'm going to watch it and make sure that the pressure doesn't start to drop below 10 pounds. You can hear that, I think, how fast that's rocking. And that is too fast. That will cause your jars to boil and can cause siphoning from your jars. So now you can see down here, I've already got the temperature down to a medium. I'm going to turn it on down a little bit more so that we can slow that down a little bit. I think you can hear maybe that little, it sounds like it's like spitting a little bit around the weight. And it's holding the temperature. And don't, you know, it's not a big deal if it stops rocking for a little bit, as long as that pressure gauge is still staying up there at you know, above the 10, up to this. On mine, I try to keep it around 11 or 12. And you'll just get used to your canner. Now, if you don't have a gauge on one, you just need to make sure that it still bounces a little bit, you know, every minute or so, and it'll be fine as long as it's doing that. I've got another question here. Okay, I've got a question here that's asking me, why do I use a standalone burner or a hot plate instead of a burner on your stove? The answer to that is the burner that I don't know if you saw the first video that I showed of all the equipment. I do have a special burner, but if you put these heavy pots on your stove without the special burner, it can burn the enamel on your stove. It also, if you've got a glass top stove, it can break your glass top stove. And so my stove in particular, the burner that I've got, I've used it off and on for years, but it doesn't really fit the outlet in the stove real good. And so it became an aggravation to me. So I decided to go with the sort of a hot plate. It's really an industrial hot plate that's 1,500 watts. And it will build the pressure up in this as fast or faster than my stove. So I actually have 2 of them, and I use one here and one on a stainless cart that can roll into my kitchen or use, you know, in another area. You don't want to plug 2 of these into the same outlet or on 2 outlets that are on the same breaker, because a breaker will only handle, I think it's 2,000 or 2,500 watts, and these are 1,500 each. So if you plug 2 of them in to outlets that are on the same breaker, the breaker's going to kick immediately. So just a little something to keep in mind. Okay, you can see now that pressure has built up a little bit now, and that thing rocks, and then it stops, and then it'll rock a little bit, and it stops, and that's exactly where you want it to be. And you can see here that my pressure is staying steady on a 12, or between 11 and 12, and that's fine. That's where it needs to be. So now, you know, once it starts, you know, once it gets up to pressure, that is the time that you start counting your time, your processing time. If it's supposed to be, you know, 15 minutes for whatever you're processing, when that weight starts to jiggle, then that's when you start the 15 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever, you know, whatever length of time it's supposed to be, and you start counting it from that time. So when it gets to that point, then all you need to do is just turn your burner off and just walk away and leave it where it is until the pressure is gone. Once the pressure is down to 0, come into the room. What I normally do is take a little spoon and I do this and see how that let a little steam out? I lift it up just a tiny bit to see if some steam is still in it. Don't ever take that weight off until you can lift that up and have zero steam coming out of it. And then once it gets there, wait about 10 minutes and take that weight off. Go ahead then and unlock your canner. And I usually wait another 10 minutes before I take my jars out of the canner and let them cool in the canner just a little bit before I take them out. That sort of helps to prevent some of the siphoning. I had said earlier in a video that sometimes they would spew around the lids onto your towel that you put them on, and that will prevent some of that. So you can see that is cooling down. It has stopped the jiggling or bouncing there. You know, it's just a little bit back there now. And the pressure gauge is beginning to drop. It's almost back down to 10. And so that's literally, I'm going to turn that around so I can talk to y'all now. That's literally all there is. All these lights are glaring. That's all there is to using the pressure canner. As we continue on this journey of learning how to process, things in the canners, excuse me, I'll go over times and things that, what you need to know about how long to water bath something for, and how long you need to know when to pressure can something for. And then we'll talk about learning how to process your own recipes and knowing whether that recipe needs to be water bathed or pressure canned.